Get in the holiday mood by creating a Christmas calendar with JavaScript and HTML Canvas. Each day of the month of December, Dr. Radu shared a tutorial on his channel teaching how to procedurally generate a unique Christmassy icon. This video is the entire Christmas tutorial series, and it's a great way to learn about modularity, reusability, and writing consistent code. You can even submit your own versions for Dr. Radu to showcase at the end of this year.
This December I'm making a Christmas calendar using vanilla JavaScript and HTML Canvas. In each one of these days I'm gonna procedurally generate a unique Christmassy item because I need icons like these around this time, and good free ones are hard to come by. I also want to easily scale and color them in different ways. I hope you'll follow along and implement your own versions so I can showcase them in a special video on the 24th. You'll practice working with coordinates, basic math, and various JavaScript programming techniques. It's a good project, I think, to learn about code modularity, reusability, and how to write consistent code. Oh, and I'll be coding without glasses, apparently, because making one video a day is not enough of a challenge. Now, let's set up the project from scratch and learn how to draw a star.
Coding with Radu. Let's code now.
I'm gonna be coding in Visual Studio Code, and in an empty folder, let's create our first file, index.html. Now we begin with basic HTML syntax, first the doc type, then the HTML opening and closing tags, and then the head. Let's close the head and give the page a title. December 2024, like so. Now, if you save this file and open it in a browser, I'm using Google Chrome. It's empty as we expect, but here at the top it does show the title of the document, so we're good to go. Now, in the body, we are going to generate that kind of calendar grid, but I'm not going to add all the elements one by one in HTML. Instead, we're going to be using JavaScript. So let me open here a script tag, and let's close it as well. And in it, I want to generate a grid with a given cell size. Let's say 200 pixels. And now we can loop through all the days, starting at day 1 and all the way to day 24. We increase and we generate a new canvas element for each day, like so. We're going to be drawing a different item on each one of these canvases, eventually. Now let's set the width to the cell size and the height to the cell size, and add these canvases to the document body, like so. Otherwise we won't see anything. Now, if you save and refresh the page, you actually still don't see anything. But if you open the developer tools inside of this elements section, you will see that these canvases are there. They are just transparent. So let's give them a little bit of a style to distinguish them. I'm going to go up here in the head section, and in the style, I will give the canvas element. Let's start with the background color. I'm going to use a light gray, like so. I'm missing some margins here. I'm going to add, let's say, a 3 pixel margin, like so. And let's round the corners a little bit to make it look nicer. Right. And we don't need these developer tools anymore. We can see the canvases, but of course, we should always keep them open on the console tab so that we can tell if there are any errors on the page. Always keep the console open when coding. Now let's fill these cells with something. I'm going to add here a function called fillCell for the day and the given canvas. And I'm going to implement this function down here. given an index and canvas element. Let's first get the reference to the 2D drawing context of the canvas, like this. And I'm going to draw everything in the center of the cell. So let's get an XY coordinate of it, like so. Half the canvas width and half the canvas height. I also want the items to have a specific size, and I could make them the width of the canvas, for example. But let's scale this down maybe to 60% so that there is some margin around the items as well. And for now, I'm going to draw a number in each of these cells as a placeholder, passing these parameters, and let's implement this function down here. So given a context and a value at x and y, let's just call the last one size, and I'm going to call fill text with the value at the xy location. Save, refresh, and there are the numbers. Quite small. Let's make them bigger and actually use this size parameter. So I'm going to set the font to size, pixels, and then let's use a monospace font like this. Okay, better, I can read them. Some of them, these are out of screen. So the bottom left corner is now the XY. I want the text to align properly. And we'll do that horizontally using text align, like this. And vertically using text baseline to middle. And now we have something to work with. Let's begin to draw the first item, a star. Now, the way we're going to structure this is here at the top, I will have an array of functions to draw different items. It's going to be an empty array for now, but I will already populate the first element with this draw star method that we have to implement. Now, this function is going to be written in its own file, but here I want to keep references to them so that the index here matches the day where we want to draw the item. Make sense? Now, assuming that this is already implemented, we can go here inside of the fill cell function and try to get the draw item function from the draw item functions at this specific index. And if we succeed, if this is defined, then we are going to call that function with these same parameters. Otherwise, we draw the number as before. And at the moment, this is not going to work because this draw star is not defined, but we will do it in its own file, like so. I'm going to include here a file inside of the items folder, star.js, and let's close this script tag. In VS Code, if you're going to control-click this, it's going to create for you the items folder and the first JavaScript file inside it, like so. And our draw star function, given a context x, y, and the size, let's just draw a bounding box for it at the moment. So I'm going to get these top and left helper variables, and then I'm going to stroke a rectangle using these values like so. A square, basically. And there it is. We're ready to draw the star now. And I won't insist on it too much because I already drew stars in other projects, like in that augmented reality Dragon Ball video. But I'm going to define the radius as half this size, and let's hard code here point count to 5. You could use a parameter for this, but it's so common to draw 5-pointed stars that we're going to go with that. And the way that we begin to do it is by drawing a circle using polar coordinates. The circle is going to be not very round because it only has 5 points. So essentially it becomes a regular pentagon. Let's see. We begin the path And we loop from 0 to point count, like so. And we need to calculate the angle. Now, this angle is going to be I divided by point count. This gives us a percent value, basically, from 0 to 1, which we can use to scale to pi, which is the full number of radians in a circle. And with this angle, we can move from the center of the circle towards the surface by calculating the surface x-coordinate relative to x, using the cosine of the angle and multiplying this by the radius, because the cosine is between -1 and 1, so we won't really see anything unless we scale it as well. And the same thing for y using the sine. If you're not comfortable with polar coordinates, I do have a video on the topic, so do check that out. And now we can line to surface x, surface y, and let's fill. Now if you save and refresh, you get this regular pentagon here. And the trick to make it look like a star is to double the number of points, but use this one here as an outer radius and add another inner radius somewhere here. So then this point is going to go here and then back up here and then back in here, up here, in here, and so on. So let's begin by typing here 10 points and renaming this to outer radius and then inner radius. I'm going to set it to half the outer radius. And then here, after we have the angle, we still need the radius. And I'm going to decide based on this parity of I. So for even numbers of I, we'll use the outer radius and otherwise the inner radius. Now if you save and refresh, it looks like a star. I kind of want it to align vertically like this, like to be symmetric according to this axis here. And we can do that in many ways. Like now it's symmetric according to this one here. So if we flip here, sine and cosine, we are going to get it symmetric to the vertical one, like this. And if you want this to point upwards, you could, for example, use a minus here instead. Now let's add colors here as well. And I think that I want to pass the color as a parameter to the items here. So maybe we go back to index.html and let's generate a random color here. I'll just randomize the hue between 0 and 360, so it can be any color really. And I'll just pass this hue here like so, because then the objects can use different shades of the same color somehow. We'll see eventually. Now I'm going to pass it here like this, and let's set this to fill style using this HSL syntax. And now I use the hue with the maximum saturation and 50% lightness. Save, refresh, and this is what we get. Every time we refresh the page, the star will show in a different color. Now this star doesn't touch all these corners of the bounding box. You can see the gap is here. That's kind of bothering me a bit, but I prefer it like this. Otherwise, scaling it vertically will not make it a regular polygon anymore. So yeah, it's gonna be like this. Also, the center of the star is here in the middle of the bounding box. So if you would rotate it, spin it around, then animating it would be as expected in this way. We don't need this bounding box anymore, but maybe you do if you still want to play with this object. So I'm commenting it out here, and looks like left and top are not useful anymore. So I'm gonna comment them out as well. To draw the ball here next to the star, we're going to go to index.html and define a new function at index 2. Let's call this drawBall, and we will implement this function in its own file called ball.js. Now, if we control-click this, VS Code creates the file for us. And as a reminder, these kind of functions for drawing the object take the context, the X and Y center point, the size of the object, and the hue that controls the color as a parameter. And let's test if this works by drawing this bounding box around the object. So I'm getting here two helper variables that we can use to draw this rectangle, a square essentially, because the width and height are the same. Now save and refresh, and this is what we get. Now to draw the ball, I want to start off by making a ring here at the top that we can use to attach the ball on the tree. And for that, I will start by defining this ring object here. And it's going to contain different properties, like the radius, how big we want this to be. And I'm going to define it as a fraction of a size, so that eventually, if we want to draw these at different sizes, they will scale nicely. And let's just draw it at X, so in the center, but then the center of the ring should be quite close to the top. So maybe top plus the radius, basically, if we wanted to touch the top part of this bounding box. And let's define color as well, using the HSL syntax. And I'm just going to use 100% for saturation and 50% for lightness. And now we can draw a circle by using the arc method with the center at ring.x, ring.y, and now we specify the radius. And we have to mention here the starting angle, 0, and 2 pi in radians. This means 360 degrees. And we can set the stroke color to be that of the ring and stroke. Now if we save and refresh, we get this ring up here, and it's way too big. I don't want it to be this size because the ball should be most of the screen here and the ring a very small thing at the top. So let's reduce the radius, maybe like this. And you can see we have a problem because this is not touching the top of the screen anymore, the top of the bounding box. Now that's because this radius value should be duplicated here as well. And this code is not very good as such because I need to remember that this here stands for the radius value. Now you can't use here the radius value as such because this object is not yet defined, but you can do a workaround and use a getter here, like so. We can get the value of I by returning the top plus this radius. And this code is going to use this radius because we will use this getter after the object is defined. So in this way, we get the functionality that we want. And no matter what value you set for the radius, it will adapt in a way that you expect. Let's make this thicker. So I'm going to add another parameter here for this thickness. Let's say like so. And for it to affect, we have to set here the line width to that thickness property. And there it is. But I don't want this ring to go outside of the bounding box. You see now the outline is drawn somehow at the center of this circle that we are defining, so it extends outside. We could fix this by going here at this piece of code and maybe subtracting here the thickness divided by 2. And now this is kind of like a full circle. Well, let's make this thickness be a little bit smaller, like that. And you see that this outline of this circle is now drawn on the inside. This kind of functionality is really common if you look at drawing software. And I'm quite sure we will need to draw a lot of circles in this project. Like if you remember that one video I made about drawing the Twitter logo, it's all made of circles. So it's really a fundamental component when making simple shapes like this. And because of that, maybe it's worth to invest in implementing a helper function, a utility function for drawing circles, easier than messing with this kind of long code all the time. So how would that be? Well, instead of this messy thing here, I would like to write something like draw a circle using this context at ring.x, ring.y, ring.radius. And now here maybe we can have some properties of the circle, like the stroke style can be the ring color, and then the line width can be the ring thickness. And now we could specify that I want the outline to be on the inside. This code is much easier to read than this one from here because, first of all, things like starting angle of the arc, ending angle of the arc, subtracting here, dividing by 2, this kind of complex mathematics disappears from this line of code. It goes inside this new function that we have to implement. And every time we're going to need to do this kind of thing, we don't need to remember the mathematics. It's easier. So I'm going to remove this other code from here and implement this draw object with the circle helper method. And we'll do that in a separate file here. I'm just going to implement it in the root folder, draw.js, and control clicking this creates me the file. You can see it here next to the items folder. And it's going to be an object that we could extend with different methods if we want. So let's say this circle as the first one, given ctx, xy, radius, and some options. We have to implement it in a similar way that we had previously. So first, the arc, using these properties and forcing here the angles to be 0 and 2 pi. And then I can use object assign to ctx all of these options. So if we are going to pass here options that match what the ctx is supporting, then a single line of code here is going to set them to those values. And now we could check to see if we want to fill this circle or not. In this case, the ring doesn't have a fill, so it's not going to execute this piece of code, but it does have a stroke, so it will execute this part of code. And let's just see if this works for now. Save, refresh, and you see it works, but kind of like as before, intersecting this part from here, because the CTX doesn't understand what we mean by this inside outline here. So this is a piece of functionality that we need to implement here by ourselves. Like if the options outline is inside, I'm going to reduce the size of the radius by half this line width. Now save and refresh, and we are now able to draw these circles with an inside outline. Okay, let's begin to draw the ball. So below this ring, I'm going to define a new object to store here properties of this ball. Now the radius is going to be quite big, let's say 45% of the size. And the x value, it's going to be just x, so we want it centered like that. And the y value, I'm going to use a getter here as well, because I want to move it from the top according to the ring radius, but also this radius that needs to be accessible here. And let's set the color value similarly as before. And now we can reuse the draw circle method that we implemented previously with the ball properties. And we're going to pass the fill style now and set that to the ball color. So this is not going to have a stroke. It's just going to have a fill. Save, refresh, and there it is. Maybe we can use a darker shade here for the ring so we can tell them apart. I'm going to reduce this to 30%. Or maybe even darker, let's say 10%. Yeah, it's almost black, but not quite black. Now, controlling the darkness, brightness of these colors could be done like this. But if you think about it, all these items that we are drawing, it might be nice for them to share the same kind of color pattern or intensity variation. And I think that we can go to draw.js and implement here an object for managing this color. So something easy, like we can get the normal color by using the hue and outputting this as we did previously, but now we can copy this a few times and say maybe this is going to be the darkest value, and let's say 10%. I'm going to use just odd values here. So dark 30% and then light 70% and the lightest 90%. And with these, we can go now to the ball here and say, okay, the color for this one should be the darkest using this hue. And now this one here should be normal using the hue. And since we have the star already, this one doesn't use this kind of color management object, so we could use it here as well for consistency. And if we decide eventually that we want normal to mean something else, all the objects are going to be affected in the same way. Now save, refresh, and things work the same as before. Let's play with these color values a little bit more, experiment with different shades. And I think that for that, I want to implement a kind of radial gradient here to give this ball a highlight. Maybe this is going a little bit too far. Like, I hope you will still have ideas to make this look even nicer after I'm done with the highlights. But I'm sure you'll figure out something. At least I have that crazy video where I make the ball have our reflection in it. It was a really fun video, and I don't think anybody answered the question of how to make it more efficient. I gave there some kind of hints, but yeah, check it out if you have time and want a challenge. Now, with this highlight, I'm just moving it a little bit to the top left. I'm going to implement a gradient centered at this highlight XY with 0 radius and all the way to, let's just use the ball radius and see how that looks like, and 2 color stops. So the first one, I'm going to try to put the light version, and the last one at 1 or 100%, let's put the darkest version and see how it looks like. And we have to pass this here to the fill style. We don't need this color attribute here anymore. Or you could use it and set it to this gradient. It's up to you. Now if we save and refresh, we get this. It's kind of dark to my taste. I think I want this normal color to be somewhere here in the middle. Make it look brighter and more colorful somehow. So let's add another color stop, maybe at 30% with the normal version of the hue. Yeah, this is fine, but this radius here where it becomes the darkest, it's too small. Let's try multiplying this by 2. Yeah, I think this looks nice. What do you guys think? We're not gonna need this anymore. And looks like we are not using this left, but we are using the top. So I'm commenting out just this one. To draw the sock next to these other items, we're going to go to index.html and here prepare another function for day 3. to be draw sock. We will implement this function in its own file. Let's call this one sock.js. And in VS Code, if you control click this, it's going to create the file inside of the items folder next to the other ones. Now the draw sock function is going to be with the same parameters as all other ones here for the center point, the size, and the hue. And I'm just going to test it by drawing the bounding box. We need the top and left to pass to the rectangle drawing function like so. It's going to be a square because these are the same value. So save, refresh, and we see now here on the third day the bounding box of the item that we are about to draw. Now I want to draw the sock from the top here to the ankle and then towards the tip somehow. So we're going to need a y coordinate for this ankle. And I'm just going to go here and define it, let's say y plus 10% of the size. And I want to draw a vertical line from the top of the bounding box to this ankle location. And I could do that using drawing methods of the context directly. But as we saw last time, we implemented this helper function for drawing circles, and lines are probably also very common things that we have to use when drawing objects. So maybe we can implement here our version of the line as well, to have fewer parameters and to do more advanced things eventually, maybe. So how would this look like? I'd say I would like to be able to draw a line on the context from the first x and y coordinate, so center and to the top, and then to the ankle y and the same x value. And the parameters, maybe I want to specify the stroke style, and let's just set it to the normal color coming from the hue. This one here. And this kind of function is going to look like draw.line with the ctx from x from y to x to y with these options. So what we do is tell the context to begin a path, move to from x and y, and line to x and y. Then I'm going to use the object assign to set these past options to the context, and then stroke. So already some kind of save, because these number of lines get reduced to just 3 here, like so. And I'm sure that in the future this is going to be much more used, so it's worth the investment, I think. Now if we save and refresh, we see this vertical line appearing there. And I would like to make it thick, like the width of the foot, basically. So I'm going to go up here and define another helper variable, the foot width, let's say 40% of the size, like so. And the other parameter that I'm going to pass here is going to be the line width. I'm setting it to be the foot width. And when we are going to save and refresh, we are actually drawing a rectangle here, but without specifying so many parameters. And we have a little bit of extra features here that we could use. Like if I'm going to set the line cap to be round, then this is going to look like so. A little bit bad here because it goes outside of this bounding box, but this ankle is now round, and that's exactly how I want the sock to be. So all we have to do is move this one by this radius down, and then maybe draw on top of it a sleeve or something. Kind of cover up magic. So let's define that radius as half the foot width. So the code becomes clearer, and we can move here from the top plus this radius. Save, refresh, and now we are not out of the bounding box anymore. And we can do that sleeve that I mentioned. So let's define a width for the sleeve, and it's going to be a little bit bigger than the foot width. So maybe we scale that one by 10%, increasing it by 10%. And now we can use the same line function again to draw from x to the top plus this radius. So we just covered that kind of rounded thing at the top. And then we can set the stroke style to maybe the lightest hue. And let's set the line width to the sleeve width. And then the line cap, I'm going to set it to not be round anymore, like so. And the only thing that we still need to do is this bottom of the foot here. And I would really like to use a parameter to control this angle. Like maybe you want the sock to look like this, towards the left, or to the right, like an L shape. So I would like to control that and have this object look differently if we want. We can go here at the top, and I'm just going to set this angle value to a default of 0, so we don't need to specify it. This is only if we really want. And we need another variable for the foot size. Like when I say foot size, I mean when you buy shoes, how big your foot is. So that bottom part. And this foot size we will use to scale the radius when working with polar coordinates according to this angle relative to the ankle x and y. Ankle y, we have it, the x is just x. So let's go here and figure out the tip of the foot. The x is going to be x plus cosine of the angle times the foot size, and the y is going to be ankle y plus the sine of the angle times the foot size. And now we can go here and draw another line like so, and basically same properties as this one from here. Save, refresh, and this is what we get. But this angle is something that we could control. So in this case, it's 0, but maybe you want this to be, I don't know, 45 degrees like this. Yeah, I think this looks nice. This sock reminds me of that one sorting visualizer I did with the crazy bird and crazy socks. Maybe it gives you some ideas. We don't need this bounding box anymore, and looks like this left variable is not used. I'm commenting them out in case you want to play with them still. To draw the candy cane here, next to all the other items, we go to index.html and prepare a new function here in our functions array for the 4th day. And let's call this one draw cane. We implement this in a new file, cane.js, and in VS Code you can control click this, and it's going to create for you the file inside of this items folder. Here we define our draw cane function, given a context, xy for the center, a size, and the hue to control the color. I'm going to test this by quickly drawing a bounding box here. I'm getting the top and left helper variables, and then using this stroke rect function at the top left with the size and the size. So it's going to be a square. Save, refresh, and now we see that we are ready to draw our candy cane. I want this to have an arc here at the top and then continue straight down. So I would like to control how wide it is and maybe how thick the candy is. So 2 more helper variables here, the width, let's say half the size, and then the thickness, maybe 10% of the size, like so. And I'm going to use an object to store this arc properties. And the first one is going to be the radius. Now, I don't want this to go outside of the bounding box, so I'm going to subtract here the thickness from the width, and then divide by 2. In that way, also the thickness gets halved, so it's not going to exceed the borders there. Now, the x is just going to be x. I want it to be in the middle. And the y, I have to use a getter this time, because from the top, I want to add the radius and also half of that thickness if I don't want it to exceed the screen size. And with these properties, I can now begin a path, and I can't use the circle method that I created previously because it's not customizable enough to draw just an arc of the circle. And customizing it so much may defeat the purpose of having it called circle there, right? We're basically re-implementing the arc method instead. So I am using it here directly. I don't think that these arcs are so common when drawing, let's say, but up to you if you want to experiment and implement your own helper function. Now, if I'm starting from pi to 0, it essentially means that I'm starting it here on the left side and going all the way like this to 360 degrees, which is back to 0 in the same way that the clock starts again and again. Now, if we save and refresh, we see that this looks like this, and it's not intersecting this bounding box. So similar things that we have done already before for the ring here. And I also want to do a line to the bottom. So line to the same arc x plus the radius to the bottom, because I want it to continue from here all the way here. And this bottom is not yet defined. We can add it here at the top because it means the bottom of this region where we are allowed to draw. Fits well next to these other helper variables. Now if we save, refresh, we get this general shape that we want. And I just want to decorate it by having those kind of stripes over it. For that, I'm going to basically draw the same path again, so stroke it one more time. And let's try to set a different stroke style, maybe a dark one. And the dash. So the line dash, I will try to reuse the thickness value that we have defined here at the top, because sometimes reusing these values, if it looks good, then there's no point defining another variable and thinking of another name for it. And I think it's going to work because it will lead to a balanced result, like the thickness between the stripes, same as the thickness of the cane itself. So I think it's a good choice. And then let's stroke one more time like this. And this is what we get. Maybe the contrast here should be bigger. I don't know. It depends also about the hue, how big the contrast is going to be. Like here, it's not that visible. So you can play with these if you want. Maybe lightest could be here and then normal for this one if you want a brighter object. Yeah, maybe something like this is nice. All these dashes remind me of that one project I made with train, that train simulation and the trolley problem project, that game. It was made only using these line dashes, pretty much. Check it out if curious, and try to make this one better. I'm sure you can do that as well. To draw the fifth item here next to the other ones, we're going to go to index.html and prepare another function here for the fifth day. Draw bow. And we'll implement this function in its own file, bow.js. In VS Code, if you control-click this, it's going to create the file inside of this items folder. And our draw bow function, given ctx, x and y for the center location, a size, and a hue to control the color. I'm going to test it first by drawing this bounding box. These two helper variables, let me draw this square here. which we'll use for reference so that we make sure that our item fits in the space that we want. Now I'm going to begin a path starting at the center and draw this kind of shape all the way to the corners that kind of looks like a bow, and then we'll fine-tune that to make it look a bit nicer. So let's begin a path and set the fill style to our normal color given the hue. Move to the center point and now line to the left top, line to left bottom. We don't have this one yet up here, but we'll have to define that, as well as the right variable and the final to the right top. And let's fill this shape. Now up here we need that right to be x plus size by 2 and the bottom y plus half the size. Save, refresh, and it kind of looks like a bow already, but a very spiky one. So to make it curve, I'm going to replace all these line 2s with a curve 2, and this is not going to be the destination anymore. It's going to be the control point. The destination is going to be here. So the control point is going to kind of pull on it, and then it's going to go here. Then this will be the new control point going here, and so on. We'll use a quadratic curve 2 function call here. You can also play with Bezier curves if you want more control here. But basically, I want to go to left and y being controlled by this one point. If I save and refresh, you see how this one is being pulled up in that direction. And this point that you see here is actually halfway from here to this middle point on this segment. So kind of good to know that, because it means that the height of this bow is going to be half of the width of this bow by the end. Let's do the rest. So here, going to x and y through left and bottom. And this one we don't need it anymore because we are already at x and y. So these two just need to be modified symmetrically on the right side. And the last, okay, good. I also want to have a kind of knot here appearing in the middle. This just looks like the, I don't know, infinity symbol. So I'm gonna go here and let's store these knot properties inside of its own object, like so. The size, maybe 30% of everything. And then for the top and the bottom, I'm gonna draw this as a rectangle, maybe a rounded corner rectangle. Let's see. So I need the top and the left in the same way that we needed top and left here for this bounding box. And top, I want to be able to use this size that we just calculated. So I'm using a getter and I return y minus this size divided by 2. And for the left, x minus this size divided by 2. And let's use a roundness so that we draw this kind of round rectangle. For that, we begin a path. Set the fill style maybe to a darker color. And round rectangle, left, top, width, height is the size. Let's just use a square. And then this roundness at the end. And fill, save, refresh, and that's the bow. This red one reminds me of the one Leonard is wearing. Let me know if you want me to make more videos like that. Maybe this knot could be a little bit smaller. Let's try here, maybe 25. Yeah, but now it kind of looks almost like a circle, so let's also decrease this roundness by half. Okay, this looks good to me. What do you guys think? I'm going to comment this out and let you explore. To draw the bell on day 6, we're going to go to index.html and add a new function here at the 6th index, draw bell. And this will be implemented in its own file, bell.js. Control clicking this on VS Code is going to create it for us in the items folder. And let's implement a quick version of it that just displays the bounding box. I take out these helper variables, top and left, and draw a rectangle from this location using the size as the width and the height. Save, refresh, and now we have our placeholder here, and it gives us a good reference when drawing the item. Now I want the bell to hang on something, a ring, like what we did here for the ball. So let's just copy that code from there. Basically this. I'm going to take it to the bell, save, refresh, and we have the ring to start with. And now the bell also has that that clapper at the bottom, that ball there. I want to draw that now, because after that we can worry about this bell shape. It's going to be on top of that ball that we see at the bottom. So let's define an object for this clapper, and it's going to have a radius, maybe same as that of the ring at the top, and the x is going to be just x, so we center it, and then the y value I'm going to need to use a getter, because I'm going to subtract from the bottom this radius that we just defined up here. Remember that this radius is not accessible before this object is created, so basically we need to use a getter for it. And bottom should be added here to our helper variables because it relates to the bounding box. Now we can continue here and give this clapper a color as well, maybe a dark color because it's going to be shadowed by the bell itself. And then here I'm going to use our draw circle method at x and y using the clapper's radius, and the fill style is going to be set to the clapper's color. Now save, refresh, and this is what we get. For the bell, I'm going to start probably here at the bottom of this ring. Let's see the whole ring this time, and draw a triangle to begin with, like so. So it cuts this clapper in half. Let's define our bell object. The top is going to be top plus this ring radius times 2. So we want to see the whole ring this time. And then the bottom is going to be bottom minus the clapper radius. So it cuts it in half. And let's begin a path and draw this kind of triangle. We're going to fill it. Let's give it a normal color from this hue, so normal intensity, and then move to the top of the bell, and then line to the left of the screen using the bell bottom, and line to the right of the screen and the bell bottom. Fill, and remember to define this right, because it's also missing here from our helper variables. X plus half the size. Save, refresh, and kind of looks like a bell already, but bells are round. We should use some kind of curve here. And this is going to show you how to use the Bezier curve, which has 2 control points. And what we do on this side should be somehow mirrored on the right side as well. So I'm going to add to this bell object this offset, and this control point offset is going to somehow specify how far we want in both directions to control the Bezier curve, the one that has 2 control points. So let's say not really half the size, but let's say 25% of the size, because that's going to move from here a quarter of the size here. So our control points are going to be somewhere here. Maybe we put one here at the top and one here at the bottom, and that's going to give us that kind of snake-like shape. We'll see. So we change now the first line to be a Bezier curve 2, and the control points. So x minus this bell offset at the top. The second one, the same thing, but we are going to use the bell bottom. And then the destination is going to be left and bottom, same that we had previously in the line 2. Now save, refresh, and you can see what we have here. You can play with these control point X offsets the way you want. Like if you're gonna make it all the way here, like so, you're gonna get this kind of bell that doesn't have that S-like shape, because both of them are here, but then controlling this more or less is going to give you a different kind of shape. So maybe you want less of this here and more here, like I'm doing now. And then when you're happy with this, repeat the same on the right side. We still need to have the line to the right and the bell bottom, because it's this straight line here, and then make our way back up here by somehow reversing those values. So another Bezier curve 2. This time we will add these offsets, and we have to remember that we are starting at the bottom. So we use the bottom first, and then the same with the top. And we end, this time we end at the middle here, so that's X and the bell top. And there it is. That reminds me, I haven't said click the bell button in a very long time. I don't like saying that. To draw the snowball here on day 7, we're going to go to index.html and add another function here to our array at the 7th index. This is going to be draw a snowball, and we'll implement it in a new JavaScript file, snowball.js. Control clicking this is going to create the file in VS Code inside of this items folder, snowball.js, next to all the other ones. And let's write a quick function for drawing the snowball with the context at the XY size and hue. And we'll begin with the bounding box. I'm getting these top and left helper variables to draw the rectangle, which is a square. I'm just reusing the size both for the width and height. Save, refresh, and now this shows the bounding box here that we can use as a reference when making the snowball. And the snowball is a circle, basically, at least that's what we'll use as a starting point. So let's try to draw that, but we'll draw it by making many small segments that kind of look like a circle, but then we'll have control over each of them to make it look a little bit more noisy. So the radius is going to be half the size. And then let's begin a path where we vary the angle, let's say A, from 0 all the way to 2 pi radians, and we increase by a very small value, and I like to use fractions of pi here. So increasing by a small value like this means that we will pretty much draw a very nice looking circle here. We need to get the coordinates on top of the circle relative to this center point, x and y. So the point on the surface of the circle, x is going to be x plus, and now we can scale the cosine of the angle. And then for the y, we do the same relative to y with the sine of the angle. If you want to learn more about these polar coordinates, I do have a video on the topic. And then we line to surface x, surface y, like so. And let's set the fill color before actually filling it, like so. I'm using the lightest color from our color generator here. Save and refresh, and we get the circle. Done. No, I still want to make it look a little bit better. So to make it look like a little bit noisy edge here, I'm going to define first a max radius. So this is going to be the same value that we used for the radius previously, but here I'm going to control the size of the radius relative to this max radius multiplied by 1, which is like 100%, minus a very small random value, like random times 0.1. This math.random gives you a value between 0 and 1, so now it's going to give you a value between 0 and 0.1. And we subtract that from 100% of the max radius. So if we save, refresh, we can see this kind of shape appearing here. And it's okay, but sometimes I think that this effect is too much. So let's decrease this by half, so 0.05 maybe. Yeah, this is much better. What I want to do next is kind of give it a shadow at the bottom. And the way we'll do that is by drawing this one again on top of it, but darker in the back and lighter in the front. So doing things again typically shouts out, take something out as a function. And we'll do just that. So all this code here for drawing the noisy ball, it's going to be a function called draw noisy ball with all these parameters, like so, and the given color. This color will be the parameter that we change. So let me align this like so and replace this lightest hue here with this color. And now we can call this draw noisy ball with the same parameters as before. And let's say we start with the normal color, which is darker. Now save. And when I refresh, you can see it works pretty much as before, but now the color is darker as previously. And we could call this 2 times. So copy this like so. And let's draw on top here with the lightest color that we have. And to see it affecting somehow, I'm just going to half the radius for now. And this is what we get. It's kind of like a very round avocado sliced in a way that I never slice an avocado. Okay, but the point is not to draw this smaller. I'm going to use the same size really, but define an offset. So I'm going to draw this not in the center anymore. I'm going to offset a little bit to the left and a little bit towards the top. So here, instead of X and Y, I'm going to multi-edit this offset.x and y. Saving and refreshing is going to look like this. You kind of see the shadow appearing here. But of course, I don't want this to go outside of everything. And one way to limit this is to tell the context that we just want to draw over what already exists on the canvas. And we can do that by setting here the global composite operation to source top. And when we do that, it only draws on top of what is there already. And you can see here this is drawing over this bounding box. But that's something we don't really care about because we don't need it, really, or these things. So this looks just fine. And maybe I want this shadow to be a little bit smaller and more towards the bottom. Like I could set here. Yeah, like that. So sun is coming from the top, basically. And I think that this looks really nice when you have some kind of bluish color there for the snow. Maybe like this. Right. Now, one thing that I always like to do when I set values like these less used properties, like the global composite operation, I tend to like to reset them. So the default value is this source over. And it's not going to change anything here, but future drawing of this object is going to not cause big problems. And of course, you could save the canvas state before drawing all of these and resetting it at the end. That's also a very common practice to avoid any unwanted effects. But up to you which approach is more suitable in your case. All this snow reminds me of that video Master Skier made about teamwork. To draw the candle here on number 8, we're going to go to index.html and set up a function at the 8th index in our array. Let's say draw candle. And we'll implement this in a separate file, candle.js. Control clicking this in VS Code is going to create it for us in the items folder, like so. And we can implement the function given ctx, the x and y center point, size, and the hue for controlling the color. Now, I'm going to take a reference to the top and left values, so I can define the top left corner when drawing a bounding box here. It's going to be a square with the same width and height. In this way, we will see here where we want our candle to fit. And to draw the candle, I'm going to basically break it up in two portions, the candlestick and the flame. So let's have an object here for the stick. Now, the width of the stick, let's say 30% of the size, and the height maybe 70% of the size. So then the flame is on the top 30%. And the X, we'll just keep it to center. And the bottom, we want a helper variable for this as well, similarly to how we have the top, but adding half the size. Now, the top part of the stick is going to depend on the height starting at the bottom. So to be able to reference height, we are going to implement a getter here for the top, returning this bottom minus this height. And we'll set the color to, let's just say, the normal hue for now. Now, drawing the stick, I'm going to use that line trick. I'm going to make a line like so from the top to the bottom of the stick. And we'll set the stroke style to the color. And then the line width is going to be the width of the stick. Save, refresh, and you're going to get this. And now for the flame, I'm going to draw an ellipse. And we will use ellipses to somehow make this candlestick also look like a cylinder. So maybe it's worth extracting ellipse as a kind of a helper function in the same way that we did for the line here previously when we drew the sock, I think. So let's keep that in mind when we implement the flame here. So the flame, it's going to have a width, maybe the stick width, 30% of that. So maybe it's nice to have this value relative to the width of the stick. Then the result looks more balanced. And then the height is going to be the full size minus the stick height. In that way we have control, so it always fits in that bounding box. The center is going to be x. And then for the ellipse, we're going to need two radii, the x radius and the y radius. I'm going to use here getters for this because I want the width and height of this flame object to control what the radii are going to be. Like so. So now I'm referencing them using this, otherwise it wouldn't work. And then let's have a y value for this flame as well. And that's going to be the top of the stick minus this y radius, which we have at the moment. So like this. And a color, I'm just going to set this to yellow. I'm not using this color object for this one because I think fire is usually yellow in these, and I don't want the candle to have a weird flame. So maybe hard-coded value is just fine for this item. And now the ellipse object, what I would like it to be able to do is draw an ellipse at the context, using the context, at the flame x, y, using the flame x radius and y radius. And now maybe some options like the fill style, let's set it to the flame color like this. And we don't have this function implemented yet, but we can do it in the draw object, maybe below the circle here, since ellipses and circles are related to each other. So parameters will be a little bit different because it has two radii here, and then the options are essentially for setting the style. We begin the path. And now the ellipse method of the context has quite many parameters. So it's one of the reasons why I wanted to extract this in our own function. X, Y, X radius and Y radius are clear, but then the next one is the rotation. Maybe we want rotation at some point, so we might extend this function to support that as well. But then it's the start angle, and then it's the end angle. So extracting this into our own function simplifies all of this logic there. We maybe don't want to draw half an ellipse so many times, and very often when we want to draw the full ellipse, we don't have to remember what those are when we use this new function here. And these options, I'm just going to copy the way that we assigned them from the circle object. So like this. And now we save, refresh, and there's the flame. It already looks kind of nice, but I really want to reuse the ellipse object to make this kind of look like a cylinder. So the stick itself needs radii for those ellipses. And we need to modify also this bottom so it doesn't go all the way here so that the ellipse doesn't cross this one. So it will move up by the y radius of this one. Let's see, back to the candle. To the stick, I'm going to go here and say x radius, this is gonna have to be half the width. And for the y radius, I guess it depends on the viewing angle. I'm just going to set it to half the x radius, like this. And now we need to remember this bottom has to move up by y radius as well. So here we can set this one using a getter like this, so we have access to this y radius. And I think we need to do the same thing for the top. Let's see. Yeah, because this flame now intersects over there. So for the top, we also need to add here this y radius. Good. And now we're ready to draw those. So I'm going to go below this draw line and draw an ellipse at the stick X bottom with the stick X radius and Y radius, and then a fill style of the stick color. Save, refresh, and this is our bottom part here, and the same for the top part. So I'm going to just copy this like so, with top instead of bottom here, like that. And I want to make this look like a light color here, because this shade should be brighter because of the flame. So I'm going to define here for the candlestick another color, a light color. The lightest that we have, our flame is very bright. And then let's use this one for the top one here. All right, very nice. Maybe this can be a darker version of the color so that the contrast is bigger. This reminds me of those candles I made for, was it Finnish Independence Day and Romanian National Day. They were rotating. The flame was always pointing up, no matter how you were holding the device. Do check those out if you haven't already. To draw the glove, here below this sock on day 9, we're going to go to index.html and prepare a function for it. We store it in this array at the 9th index, draw glove. And we will implement this in its own file, glove.js. Control clicking this will create it in this items folder. And let's implement it so that given an XY size and a hue, I'm going to use these helper variables, top and left, to first draw this bounding box, like so that we can use this as a reference when designing our glove. Now, it's going to be quite similar to this sock. So that one had this foot width and this radius controlling this roundness here. So I think we're going to start in the same way. Variable for palm width. Let's say half the size. I think we can go wider here because the socks are naturally long. And the radius is just half of that. And we can use the line method that we implemented previously from the top plus the radius to the bottom minus the radius. I just want to keep the shape inside of the bounding box. Otherwise, it's going to intersect it with the radius extending away from it like that. And the line width is going to be this palm width, and we'll use these round line caps. And let's set the stroke style to the normal hue. And remember to define this bottom here at the top as a helper variable. And there it is. Not much of a glove yet, but we could draw a thumb coming out here. Let's see. I'm going to define for it also variable for the width of this thumb. Let's say half the palm width. And now I'm going to use the same line object to draw it from maybe the same starting location, but then going to the left, x minus the radius and y. I'm trying to reuse these variables like the radius because very often it gives a result that you're happy with and you don't need to define more variables for them. Of course, you could have parameters in the same way that we controlled the angle for the sock previously. And here I'm just going to copy all of these and replace palm width with thumb width. So save, refresh, and I think I'm happy with this general shape. So the thumb extending here. It's not really a glove, it's a mitten, but I think mitten is not such a common word, so I'm using glove. Yeah, mittens are better. The fingers are all together there, so they stay warm. Let's make it look good by drawing this sleeve here as well. So the height will be the radius, and then this width is going to be a little bit more than the palm width. Let's define the width like maybe palm width, extending it by 10%. And then I'm going to draw this one with the lightest color that I have. From the top to the top plus the radius in the middle, and it's going to be wide, so using the sleeve width as this thickness, and I don't want this one to be round. And then the stroke style, let's make it very light, like so. Save, refresh, and there it is. Well, mitten or glove or... Yeah, speaking about gloves, do you remember that weird project I made once with the augmented virtual reality piano with special glove that you can play the piano in mid-air? I think that was a fun one. To draw candy here next to the other items, we're going to go to index.html, prepare our function here in the array at index 10, draw candy, and we'll implement this in its own file. Inside of the items folder, candy.js. Control clicking this in VS Code creates the file next to the others like so. And now let's quickly implement a function here given the context, x and y of the center, the size, and the hue. And I'm going to use some helper variables here to get access to the top left of the bounding box and draw it here for reference so that we can use it when designing the candy so it fits. Now I'm going to start with a simple ball here in the middle. Let's define this one, and it's going to be in the center. I'm going to give it the x and y that come here as parameters, and then the radius, it's going to be maybe a quarter of the size. So the size of this ball will be half the size of the bounding box. And let's use the normal hue color for now and draw this ball using the circle method we created previously at the ball location with the radius and passing the fill style to be the ball color. Save, refresh, and there's the ball. Now I want to give some pattern to this, like stripes over it, similar to what we did here. And I'm going to show you a trick to do that by first drawing a line from this point to this point. I know it's kind of weird, but bear with me for a moment. Begin path, move to the top left, line to bottom right, and this bottom right we need to define up here. Then the right is the x plus half the size. Let's also set a stroke style here, maybe the lightest color version that we have, and let's stroke. And this is the line. Now the trick to make it stripe this ball is to first make it very thick so it covers the ball. I'm going to go here and say line width. And it definitely covers the ball and everything else. And to make it striped, we are going to set here a stripe width to a fraction of the size, maybe 5%, and then use the line dash with this stripe width for the stripe, for the dash, and also for the spacing. Now save, refresh, and this is what we get. But what we need to do is limit the drawing to what is over the ball here. We still have this path after we draw the circle in the context memory. So what we could do is go here and clip, and we get what we wanted. But now I still want to draw those kind of things coming out here, some arcs like pizza slices to the top and to the bottom. And if it's clipped like this, I can't do that anymore. So a way to kind of undo the clip or revert to the previous version of the region where we are allowed to draw is to save the state. And now we can restore the state here. And of course, this changes nothing to what we have at the moment. Everything still works the same. But now drawing here an arc, let's say at the top of this ball, going upwards, it will be visible. So we begin a path and we move to center, X, and then the ball top. We don't have this top at the moment here, part of the ball object, but we'll define it in a second. Let's do the arc with the center there and then the ball radius. I want to reuse that value. And now thinking about these angles, starting there, so it goes to 5 pi divided by 4, and then 7 pi divided by 4, I think. And then we fill. Now that top value, and we'll also need the bottom value, we use getters because it's going to use the radius of this ball. Here we add it. And now this should work. Save, refresh, and yeah, it's fine. And we'll duplicate this whole piece of code here at the bottom as well. So these become bottom, and these angles here, so 45 degrees, which is a quarter pi, and then 3 pi divided by 4, I think. Save, refresh, and there's the candy. Nice. I don't have candy here, but I do have this cherry tomato. Probably healthier. To draw the snowflake here next to the other items, we're going to go to index.html and add another function here to our array at index 11. Draw snowflake. Now this function will implement it in its own file, snowflake.js, inside of the items folder. Control click this to create the file in VS Code. And let's have a quick function here that just takes those same parameters and quick reference to the top and left helper variables. And then let's draw this bounding box starting at the top left with the size, width, and height. And now we have here the space where we want our snowflake to fit. Let's start by drawing a simple line from the center towards the right side of the screen like this. So I'm going to go here, maybe set the line width to some value relative to the size here, so it scales nicely. And then let's use the line method that we implemented in a previous video, like so. So from the center to the right side of the screen. You can have a right helper variable if you want, but I won't bother with it this time. Nice. And now I want to branch this so that it kind of goes down like this and then also like that. So I'm going to go here and draw another line, also at X, but increasing it a little bit towards the right so that it's like somewhere here. I'm not sure exactly where, maybe 30% away from the center, so a little bit closer to the right side. And then same Y. And then the tip point, let's move it downwards and a little bit to the right. So maybe X plus 40% of the width and Y plus maybe 20%. Let's just see how it looks like. Save, refresh, and yeah, maybe a little bit to the left and a little bit to the top. Let's see. So maybe 25 here and 15 here. I'm going to refresh. Yeah, I think this is fine. And now duplicate this at the top. So I'm going to copy this and only change this Y value here to have a minus instead. And now we have one branch that we somehow have to repeat multiple times. So let's take this code out as a function for drawing a branch. Now you can style these any way you want, these branches, play with all kind of tricks. I think that Frank has a nice video about fractals where he's using them also for snowflakes, if I remember right. So maybe check that one out as well. But we'll reuse this component to draw multiple branches and rotate around the center point. For that, it helps to translate first to the center point, this X and Y. And now we have that center point as the 0, 0 coordinate. So we could loop and draw a number of branches, maybe 6. I think this hexagonal shape looks nice. I have that one video where Master Skier looks at snowflakes through the microscope. Probably a very boring video with not so many views, but it's there. So I am an expert. And then let's rotate this by a third of pi. So doing it 6 times, 5 times, it's going to make the 5 other branches. The first one is not rotated. Now save, refresh, and there it is. It just needs the color. Let's set here the stroke style. And every time you work with these operations, it's a good idea to save the state of the context and restore at the end, because they are not so used methods, and if you end up using this object in some other way, then drawing afterwards becomes weird with all these translations and rotations. So good to restore the properties when significant things change like that. I tend to not do it all the time because you normally do set things like stroke style, line width, so they become overwritten. But if you like, keep this habit of always saving and restoring the object when entering the function and exiting it. It doesn't really change any behavior now, but it will help in the future. To draw the sled here at number 12, we can go to index.html and add another function here to our array of drawing functions. At the 12th index, draw sledge. And this is going to be implemented in its own file. Let's call this sledge.js. And control clicking this is gonna create a new file inside of the items folder. And our draw sledge function, given the context, x, y, size, and the hue for controlling the color, I'm going to draw the bounding box to begin with, and I need these helper variables. So let's stroke this rectangle with equal width and height, so it's a square. And now we know where we want this sledge to fit, but they are typically long things that are not very tall. So it's going to be something like this, maybe how the bow looks like. I would start with defining the height of the sled, like how tall we want it to be, and use that as a variable throughout defining the other objects. And maybe 25% of the size is enough for that. And now let's make the base. So that bottom part that also has a kind of arc at the right. So yeah, I'm going to start with the base and we'll use a line for this. It's going to have a thickness, maybe 10% of the size. I want it to be relatively thick. And the bottom is going to be y plus half the height. Now I want that arc to come on the right side of the screen. So let's get right here as a helper variable, plus half the size. And let's define the arc as well. Let's give it a radius, maybe 40% of the height. Let's see how that looks like. And now x and y values, I want to be able to use the radius here. So I implement them using a getter, where I subtract from the right this radius. And the same thing happens for the y, but I use the bottom of the base instead. So subtracting the radius from that. And let's start drawing maybe this arc first. So we begin a path, and then let's set the stroke style to the normal, intensity, color coming from the hue, and then the line width is going to be the base thickness. And let's arc at x and y using the radius. And I want it to be like from the top towards the bottom. So I need to use minus half pi and going all the way to plus half pi. So like this. And stroke. And there it is. But this thickness is too thick here. I want the center point of this arc to move by half the thickness to the left. So I can go here at this x location of the arc and subtract here the base thickness divided by 2. And that's going to give me this that doesn't anymore intersect the right border of this bounding box. And now I can continue from here all the way to the left with a straight line. So here I could say line to left using the base bottom. And there it is. Now I want this sled to have 2 legs. So a leg here and a leg here. And I will use a helper object for that, like so, leg. And here we define attributes like the bottom. Maybe it's going to be the base bottom. It's going to be the base bottom. And then depending on the height, we calculate the top like this. And the thickness, I'm going to use a value, a smaller value, so a percentage of the base thickness, so maybe 60%. And now using this as a template, I'm going to create the left leg and the right leg. So the only difference for that is going to be the X location where the vertical stick starts. And you can do that in a nice way in JavaScript by destructuring here leg like so, and that will make left leg have all these properties the same as the leg from previously. And now all you have to do is add the x value, something like this. And for the right leg, I'm just going to increase even more from the left side. So maybe destructuring here leg again, and then 60%. And now let's draw these lines, setting a line width of this leg thickness, maybe a stroke style. Let's use a light color so it looks a little bit different than the base. And let's draw the line. From the left leg X and bottom to the left leg X and top. Save. Refresh. And maybe this can be a little thinner. Let's see. How about 30% here? Let's set it to 50%. Yeah, I think I like this value. And drawing the front one as well. So I'm just going to copy this with the right leg everywhere. And all we need is that bench where we're sitting on. So at the bottom here, bench. Now the Y value for this horizontal line is the leg top, and the left, let's just leave it like that so it touches the left side of the screen, and the right is going to be the right leg X plus the size times 0.2. So I wanted to extend a little bit from the right leg. And we draw a line, bench left, Y, right, and the same Y because it's a horizontal line. Nice. This reminds me of that Santa and his penguins. He was using a sled like this. Check out that game if you haven't already. To draw a tree here next to the other items, we are going to add another function to our array at the 13th index, draw tree, and we'll implement this function in its own file, tree.js. Control clicking this in VS Code creates the file for us. And I'm just going to quickly implement the function here with the same parameters as all others. And let's get a couple of helper variables, top and left. And I'm going to use them to draw this bounding box so we have an idea of where our tree should fit. And let's begin with the tree trunk. So starting at the bottom here, I already can tell that I need another helper variable for the bottom here. And let's have a width for our trunk. And I'm just going to set this as a fraction of the size, maybe 10%. And I'm going to draw from the bottom to maybe just the center screen because it's going to get covered with those components of the tree. Yeah, so dark values because it's going to be very dark there under all those leaves. And let's just do a simple line from X bottom to XY, which is the center point. Save, refresh, and there is the trunk. And now for these leaves, I'm going to draw some triangles, kind of like building blocks on top of each other. So let's start with the bottom block and set here attributes for it. So the bottom value of the bottom block, let's say how far we want it off from the ground, maybe 20% of the size. And then the top, maybe 50%. Let's make it so it meets this tip of the trunk for now. And now the width, I'm not going to cover the entire screen, so maybe just 80%. And we would like to have helper variables to get here the left and the right of the block, because we're going to draw a triangle. So we need those as the x coordinate. And I want to use the value of this width, not rewrite size times 80%. And for that, we need to use here a getter, because the object has to be ready to be able to use this on it. And having this as a getter means that the function will call when we try to use left, and it will work reusing the value here. So half the width to the left and half the width to the right by adding it here. And I think that all we need is the color, maybe a normal value of this hue. And now we can start drawing it. So let's set this fill style to this block color, because we will be reusing it for all the blocks, I think. And I'm going to begin the path, move to the block left and bottom, and now align to the right and the bottom, and then towards the tip. So basically X, which is in the middle, and the block top. And fill. There it is, touching here as expected, and I think it looks okay. Now we're gonna do this again and again, 2 more times, and for that this kind of code is going to become a little bit long, and I'm gonna reuse it, copy it basically. So I like to add a comment here and make sure that people know this is the base, the bottom block. And now for the middle, what I will do is I will modify the properties of this block. So I'm going to set the bottom to be the bottom minus 40% of the size this time. And now the top, this is going to define how tall we want the second block to be. So from this bottom, let's go up 30% of the size. And the block width, I'm going to reduce it as well, maybe to 60%. And now because we have these getters here that use the width value, they will be calculated according to this new width in this case. And now I'm going to just copy this piece of code here. And you probably know by now my opinions about copying code. I'm not going to do anything for it here, but I would if I wouldn't want to give it to you as a homework. And now the top part, let's move the bottom even more up, maybe 60% like this. And now the top, I just wanted to touch the top of the bounding box. And the width is going to be smaller, maybe 40%. And same as before, let's copy this like so. And I think I'm happy with this. Let's refresh until we get some nice green color. Okay. And if you need more inspiration for this one, I do have that one very fancy tree that Frank and I built in some years ago. Check it out if you haven't already. Now to make the hat appear on this 14th cell here, we have to go to index.html and add a new function into our array at the 14th index. Draw hat, and we'll implement this function in its own file, hat.js, and control clicking this in VS Code creates it for us in the items folder, like so. And we can implement the draw hat function with the same parameters that everything else has available here. And let's get some helper variables for the top and the left, like this, so that we can nicely draw a bounding box, which is a square, same width and height. And it's going to help us know how to draw the hat so it fits in this expected space. And the way we'll draw it is basically half of an ellipse going like this. So centered here at the bottom. And that already tells me now that I need a helper variable for the bottom as well. And here, let's define the width. And I don't want it to fit the whole screen, maybe just 80%. And let's define the radii. So the x radius is going to be half of this width, and the y radius is going to be the full size, because I want half of the ellipse to cover the whole screen, for now at least. And let's draw it, beginning the path. Setting the fill style, I'm going to use the normal intensity. And then I can't use our ellipse helper function because I want to draw half of an ellipse. So I'm using the default one at the x and the bottom. Now the x radius and the y radius. And the last parameters here, 0, I don't want any rotation, but I do want to start already at 180 degrees, so math pi, and going all the way to 0 or 2 pi, I think both of them should work. And then fill like this. We get this kind of hat shape. Now I want to have this kind of ball appearing on the top of the hat. So basically we'll need to also change the size of this ellipse eventually. I'm going to go up here because we'll need to define these according to that ball. So ball is going to be a radius of 10% of the size. And then let's use the x value. And for the y, I want to move it down by that radius. So I have to use a getter here to be able to add to the top this radius, which doesn't exist before the object is initialized. And then the color, I'm just going to put a light value. Basically, I use light, the lightest, when I mean something very close to white, but I still give it the kind of tint. And now I can use this ball radius here for this y radius so that the ellipse doesn't overlap with this ball. So if I refresh now, you're going to see this made space here for the ball to appear. We just need to draw it. I'm going to do that here at the bottom using our circle helper function at the ball x, y radius. And let's pass here the ball color. And there it is. Nice. I still want to add here maybe a rounded sleeve. So let's try defining it. And I'm going to use that line trick with the rounded caps. So this one will have the same width because that extra radius from the thickness is probably going to touch the screen and touch the bounding box, and I'm fine with that. So let's have the width like so, and then the height we need to use here size times 0.2, so 20% of that. So it compensates for the extra things here. Half the radius in each side will be the full value here, touching the bounding box. And now we need a y value for this, which depends on the height. So I'm going to use a getter relative to the bottom minus half the height, like so. And helper functions also for the left and right, which depend on this width. So let's type them like so. And the color, again, I will use the lightest one, same as the ball at the top. And now the line. So drawing the line on the CTX, left y as the starting point, right y as the end point. It's a horizontal line with this sleeve color. The width is the sleeve height. And then I want a round cap, like so. I just remembered I used to wear that other hat during the live streams. Does anyone else remember Gondolf, or what was his name? To add another item here, the calendar, we're going to go to index.html and add another function here in our array at the 15th index. Draw calendar. We'll implement this function in its own file, calendar.js. And in VS Code, if we control click this, it's going to create the file for us here in the items folder. Now the draw calendar function, like all others, has the context as a parameter, the X, Y center locations, the size, and the hue for setting the color. Now two helper variables, the top and the left, I'm going to use them to draw a bounding box, a rectangle that is a square really, same width and height, and it's going to show us where the item is going to be, and we're going to try to fit it in here. Now the first thing I'll draw is a rounded rectangle for the general shape of the calendar. So let's go here and set the roundness for the corner, maybe 10% of the size. And now begin a path. I'm gonna set the color to something very light because we will add emphasis to the header and the number for the calendar day. And then round rect left top size, very similar to this one here at the top, but also the roundness parameter to control those rounded corners. And fill. Save, refresh, and there it is, our general shape. And I think we already don't need that kind of helper bounding box there, because this shape is pretty much like that. So next we'll draw the header. I'm going to have a height for it and just draw it as a rectangle at the top. Let's say the height is going to be 30% of the size. And let's fill now with a dark hue. Fill rect is one function that lets us draw a rectangle without specifically calling begin path and fill. And if you save and refresh, you're going to see this header section here. But I would like those rounded corners to be somehow preserved here on the top part. So for that, before drawing this, we could call clip. And that only lets us now draw new things in the space defined by the first item we drew. What I want to add next is some holes here. Let's start with the one in the middle. And I'm going to go here and say the hole properties are going to go in this object, middle X, and the Y is going to be top plus half the header height. I want it to be in the middle of the header. Then the radius of the hole could be maybe a third of the height. Let's see how that looks like. And the color, I'm setting it to the lightest hue. Now to draw it, we have our circle helper function at the hole properties like this, and with that specific fill color. And there it is. Now let's add two more, one on the left and one on the right. And for that, I'm going to transform this X attribute into X's. And this is going to be X minus header height X and X plus header height. This code here won't work as such, but what I plan to do is loop through those X's using a for each like this. And for each of those, I'm going to run this piece of code, and let's remember to close it like so. and replace here whole x with this x parameter that loops through all of these different values. So save, refresh, and there are our holes. Now they just puncture this header part, and we can see this lighter background. But of course, if you want to puncture everything, like have transparent canvas here in this section, you could do that by setting the global composite operation to destination out. And now we can see this gray through it. Now what is still needed is some text here showing the day. And for that, I'm going to have to first deal with these changes. Like every time you clip or change the global composite operation, it's important to revert to the previous canvas state so that drawing future things isn't affected in some weird way. And I tend to do that by calling here save and then restore here when we are done with that fancy stuff. And after we restore, we can define the text properties. I'm going to hold them in an object like this. The size, let's go with half the size, and then X in the center. And for the Y, I'm going to add half the header height so that it looks in the center of this area right here, not just in the center of everything, which would put it a little bit not nice. And let's draw this text by beginning a path. I'm going to set the fill style to that dark hue. And then the font, let's use this text size here, pixels, and I use the same font we used for these placeholder numbers. And the fill text, I'm going to put here 15, but you can easily turn this to be a parameter. Save, refresh, and this point is exactly in the center where I want it, but the text is not aligned. So I have to go here and say text align to center and text baseline to middle. And I think I want it a little bit thicker, so I'm going to go here in the beginning and say bold. Yeah, this looks good. Let's put this day as a parameter so that it's more useful, really. And I'm gonna set the default to be 15. Still works. To draw a present here, we're gonna go to index.html and add another one of these drawing functions to our array at the 16th index, draw present. And we'll implement this function in its own file, present.js. When we control click this in VS Code, it's going to create the file for us here in the items folder. And we can start to write our draw present function with the ctx parameter x and y for the center, the size, and the hue. Now, two helper variables, top and left, I'm going to use them to draw the bounding box so that we see where we want our present to fit. So a rectangle from the top left with size, width, and height. It's a square, really. Now, I want the present to be a box and to stay here at the bottom side. So I already can tell that I'm going to need another helper variable for the bottom so that our code looks nice. And let's begin to define our box properties. So for the height, I'm going to leave a little bit of a gap at the top, so maybe a 20% gap. And the width of this is going to be almost covering the whole screen, because I want that lid to be at the top and to be a little bit wider than the box. Now some helper variables here, the center of this box, in the center, and then the bottom and the top. I like to draw these kind of rectangles by just making a very thick line. I think that you have to worry less about parameters and it's easy to do so. But what do you guys think? Is this something silly of a habit that I have? So my helper variables are going to be the bottom and the top, and in the center I'm going to draw a very thick line. The width I have already. For the top I need the getter, because I'm going to use here this height, which is essentially a parameter for defining the box. And let's give it a dark hue. I'm planning to make the lid lighter in color so that it looks kind of like the light comes from the top and the lid is shading the bottom part of the box. And let's do that line. So we line to from the box X box top to the box X box bottom. And then let's set here the line width to be the box width and also the stroke style to be the box color. Save, refresh, and this is the rectangle drawn as a line. Now let's decorate it a little bit and add a rope here in the middle. And that's more obviously a thin line. And in this case, because we drew that thick rectangle using a thin line, we can also use the same coordinates, the same values to draw a thinner one. We just use this rope width, which is much smaller than the box width. And for the stroke style, let's use a little bit different color to see it appearing there. Nice, but I think I want this color to stand out a bit more. So I'm going to do something here and reverse this hue. I'm taking the color essentially opposite in the color wheel, and we don't have a function for this, so in draw.js, let's implement it here at the bottom. It's essentially just adding 180 degrees to the hue value, and I think it would work like this, but let's keep it in this 0-360 range as well. So if we save, refresh, we see now the color is like the opposite of this green, and now it's the opposite of that purple and brown and so on. I think that's good. Now let's add this lid here, and it's going to be also a vertical line, a very thick vertical line starting here at the top and going some height there. Back to present.js, let's define some properties for the lid. The height, I'm gonna say 20% of the size. Let's just see how this looks like. And then for the width, I'm gonna make it be the full size, so it's going to touch that bounding box. X is in the center and the top is the box top. And now the bottom, I'm going to have to add to this top this height. And let's use that light color I've been talking about. And the line drawing happens here with the lid X, lid top, lid X, lid bottom, and the properties line width is the lid width, and the stroke color is the lid color. Save, refresh, and this is the lid. And what would look really nice is to add one of these bows here at the top. Let's see how we might do that. Draw a bow, CTX X at the box top, and let's say the size, 80% of the size, because I don't want it to fill everything. And I'm going to use also this reverse hue that we created previously so that it matches that rope color. Save and refresh. I don't like it that it's blocking the lid. Let's see what happens if we draw this before the lid. Yeah, much nicer. And now you can get the feeling of progressing much faster when drawing these compound shapes. It shows how making good modules can make development much faster in the later stages. Let's remove this bounding box. to draw the cookie here next to all other items, we're going to go to index.html and add another function to our array at the 17th index, draw cookie. And we'll implement this in its own file, cookie.js. Control clicking this will create it in VS Code here inside the items folder. And our draw cookie function is going to have the same parameters as everything else. Context, XY, size, and the hue. And let's begin by drawing that bounding box using these two helper variables and stroking this rectangle with the same width and height. So this is where we want our cookie to fit. And I'm going to draw it using the technique we studied in that Ebbinghaus illusion video by making many circles appear when drawing a single circle. You'll see. I'm going to set a radius to 1/4 of the size this time, so not filling that whole shape. And then I'm going to draw it using these default parameters, setting the line width to the radius. So it's going to be a very thick circle. And the stroke style, let's give it a dark color. I always think about cookies as dark because they've been burnt there in the oven. So save and refresh, and this is what you see. Now you could get this donut shape to fill this whole region by doubling its radius. So let's do that. ×2 here. And now it just looks like a filled circle. But remember, this is a stroke we have here, just a very thick one. And the next step will be to use line dashes in a sort of creative way. First, what I want to know is what is the length of this circle that we are drawing, because I want to be able to divide this length in even parts. And we just have 2 pi r for the length of the circle, and then the dash length is going to be how many parts you want to divide this length into. I'm going to choose 6. And then we set the line dash to 0 and the dash length. Now what this will do is basically give the spacing of dash length, but the dash itself is 0. So doing this, if you save and refresh, it shows nothing because the dash is like invisible. But if you would put here a very small value like 0.1, okay, maybe too small, 0.3, you can see these dashes appearing here like that. Now the trick is to use a round line cap, because then all of these dashes start to have a rounded part like this and a rounded part like this. So even if you keep this value as a 0, because of this round line cap, this will look kind of like a cookie shape, doesn't it? Now to decorate it and make it look nicely, I'm going to draw one of these snowflakes on top of it as a icing. But for that, we need to reset this line dash, otherwise the snowflake will be drawn dashed as well. So let's do this and then draw snowflake CTX XY, and I think I want it a little bit smaller, so maybe 80% of the size. And let's use this hue and see how it looks like. Save, refresh, and quite nice. I like it. But I would really like this to be brighter, like the icing should be much more contrast between it and this cookie. And there's no really a way to set exact color to this, just the hue, and I let it do its magic there. I could expand this snowflake to have even more parameters, but I don't want to do that. So I'm just going to hack it a little bit and increase this brightness by adding a filter here, where the brightness will be set to 2, meaning 200%, so double the brightness. If I save and refresh, you can see this is much brighter now. And icing is usually white. So maybe removing the color here, you could add another filter for grayscale. Yeah. But the brightness is still not that powerful. So you could use even bigger values here, like maybe 20. That's like 2000%. And save, refresh. And I think that now it must become white no matter what. Notice also how this snowflake has rounded caps here, and I think that's good. This one is much more sharp, but this one, because we have set here the line cap to round, it's affecting it, and I think that's good because when you put the icing on the cookie, it's kind of like toothpaste. It keeps the edges round a little bit. So it adds to the effect, I think. I really like how now that we have implemented many of these items already, we can use them in creative ways, and the end result in code is really small, but the items look quite complex. To draw that winter globe here next to all other items, we're gonna go to index.html and add another one of these functions into the array at the 18th index. Draw globe. And we'll implement this function in its own file, globe.js. And control clicking this in VS Code is going to create the file for you here in the items folder. Now, let's implement the draw globe function with the same parameters that everything else had. And I'm going to use two helper variables for drawing the bounding box so that we have an idea where this globe has to fit. Here. And the first thing I'm going to do is draw a ball that is going to start here at the top and almost reach the bottom, because at the bottom I want it to have a kind of base. So the ball, let's store its properties in this object. Radius, maybe 45%. So 50% radius would make it full. And in the center, but for the Y, I want to use this radius to offset the top. So I'm going to use a getter. In that way, I can use the this keyword. Otherwise, it's not accessible before this ball object is fully created. And then the color, I'm going to use a transparent white color here. And this is very specific to this globe. I want it to be transparent, similar to how the fire in the candle was yellow. It's not going to be one of those reusable colors this time. And let's draw the circle. Add the ball X, ball Y, and ball radius with the fill style ball color. Save, refresh, and this is our transparent globe. And now for the base here at the bottom. I can already tell we need one more helper variable here for the bottom. And the base here, I'm just going to draw a horizontal line somewhere in the middle, and it's going to be a thick line with rounded caps. So let's create the base object. The height, maybe 20% of the size. It's going to cover the ball a bit, giving this kind of impression that the ball is not really a perfect ball, but has a cut piece at the bottom. And then the width, let's just try 60% of the size. It will be a little bit bigger than that because of the rounded caps. And then for the Y value, I need to go up half the height from this bottom. So I need this keyword here as well, and I'm using a getter. And then the left and right, these are something that are helper variables we can use for drawing this shape, this line, and they are getters as well because I want to reuse that width, which is the only parameter here next to the height. And these become automatically calculated as a result. And the color, I'm just going to use a dark color for the base. And let's draw this line, base left, and the Y, and right, and the Y. And then let's set the stroke style to the base color. Let's set the line width to the base height. And let's set the line cap to round. Save, refresh. Pretty good. Maybe a little bit too big. Like, let's reduce the height a little bit, like 15%. Yeah, I like this more. And now let's add a tree here, somewhere in the middle. So I'm going to do that before drawing the circle, because I want the transparent circle to be on top of the tree to make it look more faded. And the tree properties, the size, I'm going to make it relative to the ball radius, maybe a little bit bigger so it fits more of the ball, like maybe this 20% increase. And then the X. And the Y is going to be the ball Y, just in the center of the ball. And for the hue color, I'm going to reverse the hue again, so it's like an opposite color from the base of the globe. And I think this is gonna make it more interesting. And draw the tree, tree X, tree Y, tree size, and tree hue. Save, refresh, and there is our tree floating here in space. I think we need to give it a ground, a snowy background here. So also before drawing the tree, I'm going to add some snow. And this is just going to be an arc here. So I need to give it some kind of name so that we know what to expect. What is this piece of code for, really? And I'm using a comment there. Now these coordinates, I'm offsetting them so that it starts a little bit on the right bottom and then goes a little bit on the left bottom, and same angle here to the horizontal plane. So it's not going to be half of the ball, but a little bit the bottom of the ball, that's going to be snowy. And let's see how that looks like with the fill. Save. Refresh, and this is pretty good. Maybe we make this one a little bit higher, so it's kind of like a hilly slope. Let's say it's at the mountains. So making this one 0.5. Yeah, something like that is good. I think having some asymmetry here and there is a good idea. Often things tend to look way too symmetric when I look at different graphics nowadays. To draw that bell arrangement here next to these all other items, we're going to go to index.html and add another function to our array at the 19th index. Draw bells. Now this is going to go in its own file, bells.js, and if you control click this in VS Code, it's going to create the file for you in the items folder. Our draw bells function is going to look like pretty much all other drawing functions in this project. And let's use these two helper variables to draw the bounding box so that we have an idea where these bells have to fit. And this is it. Now I'm gonna obviously reuse this bell that we created earlier and draw one here and one here tilted somehow. I want them to be symmetric relative to this center point X, so I'm gonna use an X offset and a rotation to control how much they tilt. Now this bell object is going to have some helper variables here with size. Let's just set it to half the size, see how this looks like. Two of them need to fit here, so yeah. And the y, I'm going to just leave it in the center for now. And the x offset, let's use this one as 20% of the size. And the rotation, I'm going to go with 1/6 of pi, so 30 degrees basically. And now let's use the translate to go to this bell location and rotate according to this bell rotation attribute and draw the bell at the -x offset, 0, bell size, and hue. We can place 0 here because this translate handles the XY. We just do this offset directly at this point. Now save, refresh, and this looks good, but I would like them to be lower and draw one of these bows at the top. So let's modify Y here to be Y plus maybe 50% of the size. I think this is fine. And let's copy these lines below. Now we rotate by -2 rotation because we're already rotated in one direction. So we have to compensate twice for the other one. And here we want just using the offset. I'm going to put plus here. I tend to do this when having minus, plus, and similar lines, because if you don't, then things don't align so nicely. And I think it helps to identify that these lines are doing basically the same thing, a very similar thing, if they look almost the same. So plus here. Save. Refresh, and there it is. Nice. All we have to do is draw the bow. But because we have translated, rotated, done a lot of crazy stuff here, we go and save the state and then restore here after drawing these bells so that we don't have to think too much about what are the coordinates for the bow. Now, it's going to have a size, let's say 50%. And then the Y value, I'm just going to try opposite this one. Sometimes using these values that you already have, flipping them, doing some kind of complement tends to look good. Of course, not always, but it's my first guess when I ever need to do something like that. I'm reversing here the hue so that the bow stands out. Now save, refresh, and it's good. But I can see a little bit this ring here behind the bow, and maybe I want the bow to be a little bit bigger. Let's see. Yeah, this is really nice, I think. What do you guys think? I think it's really, really cool how using these existing objects makes it very fast to code these more complex items, and it's also nicer to watch these more advanced items, how they look like. If you wanna build a snowman, you have to go to index.html and add another function into the array. I'm gonna stop this now. So draw snowman is going to go here in its own file, snowman.js. Control click this to create the file automatically in VS Code. And the draw snowman function has the same parameters that everything else had up to this point. Now top and left helper variables. And let's stroke this bounding box where we want the snowman to fit. Right here. And we're going to use the snowball to generate the snowman. And I think I'm going to use 2 balls, one at the bottom and one here at the top, and maybe give it a hat as well. You can also check this Canvas course I made a while ago, the one for beginners. In it, there is this snowman project, and I think that we customize it a little more in that one. So 60% for this bottom ball and X, so it's in the center. And then for the Y, I'm going to move it down like that so that it touches the bottom part. And let's draw the snowball using our function we built a long time ago. Like this. Save. Refresh, and there it is. And now for the one at the top, I'm just going to copy this and replace this with top ball, like so, and reduce these sizes a bit, maybe 40%, and let's move it up a bit, maybe minus here. It's not going to be exactly on top of the bottom ball, but I kind of like it. It gives this 3D effect, like we're watching the snowman from the top. And now we can draw the eyes here. I'm going to just draw circles and use this top ball properties when defining the eyes. So let's have a similar strategy like what we did here and have offsets from the X. Radius is going to be quite small, maybe this, and then X offset, maybe this. Well, let's see how it looks like. And for the Y, I'm going to use the top ball Y value, so it's in the middle. And let's draw the circle. X mine is the I offset, and the IY, I radius, and then fill style, I'm going to set the darkest hue. It's almost going to look black. Yeah. Let's make these smaller, maybe much smaller. Okay, a little far apart. I think this is fine. So let's do the other one. I'm just going to copy this and add a plus here for the offset. And this is quite nice. Now the hat is going to be very similar to what we did here with the present, but upside down. So let's try that. I'm going to set for this hat width, maybe 30%. I think this should look good. And the height is going to be 20%. It's going to be centered, and the bottom is going to be relative to this top ball. I just want to move it up so it's above the eyes a little bit. And the top part of the hat, it's just going to be the top of the bounding box. I wanted to touch that. And the hue, let's reverse the color so that it stands out. And draw a line from the hat bottom to the hat top in the center screen with a very thick width, the hat width. And the stroke style will be, let's darken this hat hue, save, refresh, and kind of looks like one of those Turkish hats. I think it's good. It needs also that sleeve, and maybe it can go a little bit more to the bottom, so yeah, I think this is nicer. That sleeve, so here, sleeve height, 10% of the size, and the width, we're gonna make it a little bit wider, maybe 40% of the size. And I'm gonna draw another line for these at the bottom. And then the top here, I'm just gonna subtract from the bottom the hat sleeve height. And sleeve width for the line width. And then the stroke color, I'm gonna use a normal shade here. Kind of like opposite idea from the present. Somehow I'm thinking that the snowman is so bright that it shines the bottom part of the hat. I don't know. Do check out that Canvas course for beginners. In it we have some kind of random snowman generator, if I remember right. So it changes those proportions randomly, and that can be a nice thing to have. I'm in a bit of trouble. I have a meeting starting in a little over half an hour, and I want to finish all of these in this session. So let's see how we draw that crown in a faster pace than usual. Probably it's a good idea because these might be a little bit boring by now. I don't know. Let me know in the comments. So adding a new function here, 21, draw crown. And I'm going to add this one in its own file up here, crown.js. Control click to create the file. And the draw crown function is going to be using ctx, xy, size, and hue. Same as all others so far. Getting the helper variables here, top and left. And now I'm going to stroke this rectangle so that we see where we want this crown to fit. And this is the bounding box. Now I'm going to draw this as a circle with some kind of thickness. So let's add variables for those, maybe 20% of the size for the thickness. And I'm going to put the radius to half the size so it fits the whole screen. And let's draw the circle using our helper method, using the stroke style, light version of the hue. I plan to stripe it in a second. So light, dark contrast. And the width is going to be this thickness value. And I also want to use the outline on the inside. If you don't remember what this did, is it keeps, even though this is the outline of the circle, it doesn't do it on both sides. So without this line of code, the circle will intersect the bounding box, and we don't want that. Now, for the stripes, I'm going to go here and first calculate the length of the circle. I want to have control when I divide this into slices. So the length of a circle is 2 pi r, and then I'm going to use line dashes. I like line dashes a lot, apparently. Here we're going to have thin dashes, so let's divide this by maybe 30. And set line dash, so the dash is this length and the space is also this length. Now we just copy this below and use a darker color so that it looks nice. And maybe I would like these to be even thinner. How about dividing here by 40? I think this looks nice. All it needs is one of these bows. I'm gonna place it maybe here, but before we draw that, we have to undo this line dash. I don't want a dashed bow. And it's going to start at X, and the Y minus the radius, and then plus the thickness, or just top plus the thickness. Size is the radius. I think because the bow is half as high than wide, this is gonna look good. And let's reverse the hue here so that the bow stands up. Nice, really good. Okay, looks like I might get to that meeting. I hope. Okay, 2 items to go, and under half an hour I'm gonna have a meeting, so I have to go a little bit faster coding this ice skate. The way you do it is you go to index.html and you add another function to this array. at the 22nd index, draw skate. This is going to be a function that we implement in its own file. And we create it by control clicking in VS Code. It's here in the items folder. Now, the function for drawing the skate is going to look like every other one, XY, size, and hue. And let's draw that bounding box. I'm going to use these two helper variables. And stroke, rect, top, left, size, size. Save, refresh. And this is where that ice skate has to fit. And my plan is to use the sled and combine it with the sock somehow. So let's start with the sled as the bottom part. And I'm going to go here and say this object is going to hold its properties. X, I'm just going to keep it centered. And then the bottom part, I'm going to add here 40% of the size to the bottom because it has a height as well and I don't want it to intersect the bottom part. And then the size, and let's just draw and see how it looks like. Probably we're going to have to play with those values a little bit. But otherwise, it's now here. And let's say this value 30%. Okay, maybe 35%. I wanted to touch there. Yeah, maybe a little less. But actually, when I draw this sock will have a sleeve there. So I want it to cover this top part here. That means that the sled should be a little bit smaller. I don't want this to touch here, or else you see something coming out of it and it's not nice. So maybe we reduce this size to 90% of the size. Yeah, I think this is fine. And now the sock. So let's go here. Sock in the center, at least to begin with. Size, and then draw the sock with these properties. Again, probably I need to modify these a little bit. I'm also reversing the hue so that we have a 2-color combination there. Yeah, good that we made that sock have a parameter here. So if we set that angle to 0, it should look like that. Let's try. Yes. And now let's move it to the left a little bit. Maybe, I don't know, 25%. Okay, this is quite good, but I still see it there. So I think it should be bigger. Yeah, maybe bigger. So size, increase it by 10%. Yeah, I think it's still coming out a little bit there. And now it's touching that bounding box. So let's move it down just a bit, maybe 5%. Yeah, good. Phew, looks like I might make that meeting after all, because working with these components here is not that hard. I have 15 minutes before a meeting, so I have to speed this up. But good news, it's the last one, and bad news is it's maybe the hardest one, the reindeer. To add it here, we need to go to index.html and add a new function to our functions array. Draw reindeer, and we'll implement this in its own file, reindeer.js. In VS Code, control clicking this creates the file for you here in the items folder. And let's implement the draw reindeer function, ctx, xy, size, and hue, same as all other functions in this project. And I'm going to use these helper variables to draw this bounding box so that we know where we want the reindeer to fit. Good. Now, the way I'm going to draw those antlers is by reusing this snowflake. I think it's kind of a cool idea. So just the top parts of the snowflake will be like those antlers. Let's just see how we might do that. And I don't know if this would be the best way to do it, but I'm gonna start by drawing the snowflake in the center, like this. And I'm gonna modify the snowflake code so that it doesn't draw the first, second, third, or fourth, but only the last two in this case. And I need to go here and search for the snowflake. And I'm going to implement this using a pattern. So another parameter here. By default, all of those 6 branches are on. And here I just have to check if the pattern shows 1, then it's going to proceed here and draw that branch. So let's save this and refresh. And nothing changed for all the other places where the snowflakes are used, and not for this one either. But if we go back to our reindeer code and we specify here a pattern of 0, 0, 0, 0, 1, 1, and refresh, we see that we don't get those. So if you would like to have one in the middle there, you could do this. But no, I want just the antlers to appear in this case. And I want them also to touch the top part. So let's move it a little bit upper here, maybe minus 5%. Yeah, I think this is fine. And now let's draw the head. I'm just gonna use a circle. So let's say head radius, 20% of the size. And I'm going to draw the circle at XY, head radius, and here the fill style. Let's make it dark so it contrasts well with this snowflake. I think this is good. And now for the eyes, similar as what we did for the snowman. Eye, radius, maybe 5%, and the X offset, let's try with 10%. And draw a circle, the one on the left, so minus the offset, eye radius, and then the fill style. I'm going to use the darkest mode because it's going to look almost black. Okay, maybe this is going to be fine. Let's see. I want to draw that, that snout also. Let's mirror this and then play with these variables more if we need later on. So mirroring this with a plus. Okay, and for the snout, I don't want to use another circle. I think it would look too funny, but an ellipse instead. So 2 radii there. Snout in the center, let's say X. Then I want to move the Y a little bit down, so maybe 20%. And then the X radius and Y radius, let's just set these to a circle for now, and then modify how it looks good. And the fill style, the lightest color here. Okay, so looks like I got it to touch the bottom part. Good. So I can modify these maybe slightly now in the same way, like 25 here and 25 here should keep it touching the bottom part, but now this looks more like an ellipse. I think I like this, and the eyes are fine. It kind of looks like this is blocking them, but it's this kind of funny. The reindeer is getting close to the camera, and the snout is blocking everything. It's fun. Okay, last thing, the nose. Big red nose circle. Let's try 20% and 10% here for the radius. Yeah, that's it. Let's remove, and looks like I'm gonna get to that meeting. Remember to tune in tomorrow to see all your contributions. Thanks for watching and see you guys. And happy holidays. Ho, 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 ho. I have to close this now. Bye-bye.